Good morning, football fans, and welcome to episode 158 of Morning Kickoff, a weekly show where we cover all news football. I'm your host, Matt Whit, and today we are live on youtube.com/MattWhit. You come check us out every Monday and Thursday morning on the Morning Kickoff YouTube channel, and you can check us out on Monday and Thursday morning, usually around 9 o'clock in the morning. However, today we're an hour late. However, it doesn't matter. An hour late, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, as long as we're here and we are talking football, as we are one day removed from a pretty good, above average Super Bowl. Not going to say it was a bad Super Bowl. The halftime show was great. The game overall was back and forth, and it was an enjoyable game to watch and just kind of showed how the NFL league is actually heading now. I mean, we're going to talk about all this on today's episode of Morning Kickoff, or else you can listen to all the pre-recorded podcasts wherever you get your podcast. But today is February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, all you beautiful people. It is Valentine's Day, and we're going to show a little bit of what we love with this Vikings organization. We love you, Justin Jefferson. We love you, Kwesi. Even though you haven't done anything for our team yet, Kwesi, we still love you so far, and we love this Vikings team. So we have a lot to look at for today's episode. We're going to discuss, obviously, the Super Bowl. I mean, it was a very good Super Bowl, and we're going to discuss what we liked and what we didn't like in the Super Bowl, and we'll talk about all this on today's episode of Morning Kickoff. I hope you all enjoy.
Do you enjoy listening to this podcast? If you don't, that's totally fine. But if you do and would like to help out, there will be a link in the description that will bring you to my merch store. At this store, we sell t-shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs, and all of the profit earned will go towards the production of this podcast. Thank you all, and enjoy the show.
Super Bowl 56 is in the books. The LA Rams beat the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20 in LA in SoFi Bank Stadium. And now us Vikings fans can officially say that our head coach is a Super Bowl winning head coach. Now, he hasn't signed with the team yet, but we know he's a Super Bowl winning head coach. Matthew Stafford is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. What does that mean? I mean, Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford, I believe they're pretty much even. I think a lot of us can agree that Matthew Stafford and Kirk Cousins are on the same level of talent. And if they're a Super Bowl winning quarterback and Kevin O'Connell's a Super Bowl winning head coach, I mean, from what we've seen so far, it looks like the Vikings are going to stick with Kirk Cousins. And I've mentioned many times that if the Vikings stick with Kirk Cousins, I'm not going to hate the decision completely, as long as he doesn't play under his $45 million cap hit in 2022. But it is such a good sight to see. So, first of all, I just want to mention here how Bengals fans should not be that upset. Now, obviously, it's the Super Bowl. You want to win. I bet they're right now not being very happy in Cincinnati, and I know they closed schools today. They're not very happy in Cincinnati. However, with that being said, I mean, a majority of the league, me included, I'd cut off an arm and a leg to be in the situation that they are in right now. They are in a tremendous, outstanding situation. As a matter of fact, Cincinnati Bengals fans, you'll see right here, I have this mug in all of my episodes. It is Next Year Will Be Our Year Club, and it is all of the colorways of the teams that have yet to win a Super Bowl. You have Browns, Lions, Jaguars, Vikings, of course, and then Bengals right there, and then you got all the other teams. There are 13 teams who have yet to win a Super Bowl. I mean, that's unbelievable. One of them is Texans, who don't even have a Hall of Famer. Yeah, I don't believe the Texans even have a Hall of Famer. But yeah, this is the list of teams that have yet to win a Super Bowl, and we don't have to update the mug. So there's that. So Cincinnati Bengals fans, you can hit up the merch store. Still are going to be on this mug for at least one more year, but Bengals are in such a good situation, and I believe, like, obviously you're mad. Like, you wanted to see your team win a Super Bowl, but at the end of the day, like, you are in such a good position. They did much better than we expected them to be. Now, I mentioned many times on this show, I said the Bengals are very underrated, and I believe they were going to go to the AFC Championship game. Did I think they were going to take down Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in the loudest stadium in football? No, I didn't think that was going to happen. I can't believe that they were able to do so. They also knocked out the 1 seed Tennessee Titans, best record in football. I mean, just an outstanding season from Cincinnati Bengals. And all of their stars are just so young. I mean, you look at Joe Burrow, obviously. You look at Jamar Chase. Like, that's the connection that brought him to the Super Bowl. Outside of that, Uzomah's been stepping up, and he's young player. Joe Mixon, young player. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, like, the list goes on of young players on that team. And if they just beef up that offensive line, they're going to be competing for a Super Bowl next year as well. Just looking at how weak of a division that they're in. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger's gone. Lamar Jackson, who even knows? That man is struggling to stay healthy now. And then the Browns are the Browns at the end of the day. The Browns are just the Browns. So just a tremendous performance from the Rams and Bengals. They did a great job as well. And I'm just kind of hoping that was not a Kevin O'Connell's call that for a majority of the game, the Rams were running into brick walls. Hats off to the Cincinnati Bengals defensive front, because that is a great defensive front. The rest of their defense, we're not giving them any credit. Well, their safety duo is pretty good. The rest of their defense, terrible. Eli Apple entered the league as a meme with the Giants, continued to stay a meme with New Orleans Saints, and is still a meme with the Cincinnati Bengals. Don't know why he is still a starter, but he shouldn't be with the team next year. I'm surprised they weren't playing Trey Waynes. I believe he was healthy out there. So as a whole, they just need to beef up that interior offensive line. And if they can get their starters back on defense, load up on the secondary, like, Bengals are going back to it. They're in such a good position to rebuild, and in a better position than the Rams, to be honest, because Rams don't have a pick for the next 5 years. Now, I mentioned how their defensive front did a great job. Cam Akers had 1.6 yards per carry. Darrell Henderson has 1.8 yards per carry. Sony Michel had 1 yard per carry. That's an average of what, 1.3 yards per carry. Just a great job from the Bengals defensive front, and a terrible job from the Rams offensive play calling. I mean, Rams, I'm sorry, but I've mentioned it. Rams could have ran away with this win by more than 10 points, by more than 16 points. But the play calling was terrible, and I was surprised to see how bad it was. And then by the second half, when Odell Beckham was out, they started the second half continuing to run the similar offense, and then obviously led to an interception, giving it to this dude, whatever his last name, who starts with an S. He's stepping in for Robert Woods and now stepping in for Odell Beckham. Big shoes for him to fill right there. But didn't have a great day from him. However, they realized that they had Cooper Kupp by the end of the game and just lit up the field. I mean, I just don't know why they weren't feeding Cooper Kupp all game long. Cooper Kupp finished an amazing, tremendous, outstanding season with a Super Bowl MVP and 99-yard game or something like that. I mean, he had 7 yards rushing on top of his 92 yards receiving, had a multi-touchdown game. Just an excellent receiver, tremendous player, and he should have got MVP. Why did Cooper Kupp not get MVP? I mean, you really gave it to Aaron Rodgers on a down year. You really gave it to Aaron Rodgers again, who just had a okay season. I mean, it's a shoulder shrugging season. I mean, it was not a tremendous season from Aaron Rodgers. And then you look at Cooper Kupp, who had the best wide receiver season, arguably, of all time, and you didn't even give it to him. It just comes to show how I hate MVP, because it just goes to quarterback. Like, don't get me wrong. Quarterback is obviously the most valuable position. It is. But if you're looking at Cooper Kupp here, he is arguably the most valuable player to a team, again, amongst all of the teams that were in the playoffs. I mean, just look at what he did for his organization. They won a Super Bowl off of him alone. I mean, Tyler Higbee was out there starting tight end. Robert Woods went down with the injury. I believe he had torn his ACL halfway through the season. And then Odell Beckham Jr. went down halfway through this game. And Cooper Kupp carried their team. Tremendous season from Cooper Kupp. Should have got an MVP on top of that, but still arguably the best wide receiver season of all time when you're talking about postseason on top of that, where he ended it with a MVP. Just a great season from Cooper Kupp. And as a whole, the Rams' entire defense, like, that defense is tough. And looking at the Rams here, and it just kind of, this game, and I mentioned it going into this Super Bowl, how this game proves where the league is going right now. Where you look at both of these teams, and then you look at, well, what do they both have in common? They are led by young, offensive-minded head coaches. Zach Taylor is an amazing play caller. Sean McVay is an outstanding offensive mind. They are young, offensive-minded head coaches. This was the youngest head coach to head coach Super Bowl ever in history. And it just kind of shows where the league is heading, how these are two high-powered passing offenses going head-to-head. Now, don't get me wrong. Their defense, both of their defense are okay. Like, the Rams have loaded with a bunch of Hall of Famers on defense. When you look at Jalen Ramsey, who had a terrible day, by the way, Jalen Ramsey just looked awful. And it's why I continue to say AJ Terrell is the best corner in football. I believe right now there's hands down AJ Terrell is the best corner in football. And in 2 years, you guys will realize this. Why do you not know this? Because he plays for the Falcons. Sorry about my camera. I need to get I'm ordering a new cord for it, but the camera keeps glitching a little bit. But AJ Terrell's the best corner in football, and this game kind of showed that Jalen Ramsey's a tad bit overrated. Don't get me wrong, he's an excellent player, but he's a tad bit overrated. Didn't have a lot of tape on Jamar Chase going into this matchup, though. But look at their defense as a whole. Obviously, Aaron Donald was so much him. I mean, Von Miller, future Hall of Famer. Leonard Floyd is just an excellent defensive lineman as well. I'm missing some other names here, but they're just loaded with talent on defense. But you look at both sides, it's just high-powered passing offenses. I mean, Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase were two of the best receivers this season. Both finished top 5 in receiving yards. And then you look at the supporting cast, and again, it's just high-powered passing offenses led by young, offensive-minded head coaches, which is why I love to see that my Minnesota Vikings is following is following suit, going with a young offensive mind, and hopefully looking to be a pass first, pass heavy team who still has the run game available. And that's what I'm looking for this Vikings organization to kind of follow suit, because this is a copycat league. You see what is working for team. You look at this. You look at these Super Bowl contending teams, and you looked at just the Final Four. I mean, even look at the Packers, who finished the 1 seed in the NFC, and just a majority of teams right now that are led by young offensive minds that are a pass-heavy team that pass on first, second, third, fourth down. All downs are passing downs. Now, this game didn't really show that, as the Rams tried to run the ball a lot, which I thought was stupid. I mean, I was sitting down, and I'm just wondering why the Rams kept running the ball, because this it made absolutely no sense, because you're going up against the Bengals defensive front, which is a solid defensive front. Now, it's nothing crazy. However, you got to give credit where credit is due. And then you look at their secondary and you're like, well, we have Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. for half the game, and they weren't throwing it past the sticks. I just didn't understand that at all. Maybe you got the little guys coming out, the NFL is rigged. It's rigged. That's why they were doing that. Now, there was some hints on the NFL being rigged in this game. I'm not going into any of that, because I don't want to try to ruin sports for you guys. I don't want to try to ruin sports for myself. So I'm not going to go into any of that, but there was some questionable play calls, some very questionable play calls, including a missed face mask, I believe it was, on Jalen Ramsey, and it was a missed face mask. There was a holding penalty, and it was just all in the Bengals' favor too. It just was all in the Bengals' favor, and you can kind of question why maybe they were trying to make this game go into overtime, try to make this game a little bit closer than it was supposed to be. But yeah, Rams should have won by more than just one score. I'm going to be completely honest. I was cheering for the Bengals all the way. I wanted the Bengals to win. I wanted to see this young team come out there and beat the Rams. Didn't think it was going to happen. But it was closer than I expected. It was closer than I expected. Just a 3-point win for the Rams. And yes, the refs made some bad calls in this game, and then some missed calls as well. So just kind of shows maybe there is something going on with the refs here, because those are some terrible calls that we saw in this game. There was no penalties in the first half of this game, actually, outside of one of the he wasn't even active. The inactive players who ran onto the field or something like that. He's probably not even gonna have a job anymore. He was the only penalty that led to the Rams team in the first half of this game. Just a stupid move. I don't even know his name. That's why he's probably not going to play this next year, because I have no idea who this guy was, and he ran onto the field and costed them 15 yards. So that was the only penalty in the first half of this game, and they obviously missed a couple calls. But outside of that, just a tremendous game. Now, when you're looking at the Super Bowl, you also look at halftime show and commercials here. That halftime show, outstanding. I mean, just standing ovation for this halftime show, because here's the thing. Rap music might not be for everybody. However, I feel like everybody can enjoy that, because it was an enjoyable halftime show. There was people who everybody knows, and I felt like it knocked out a majority of generations. Obviously, a majority of these rappers came out of like the 90s and 80s, so mostly millennials. But you look at even with Gen Zs and the generation before that, like, they know who Snoop Dogg is. They know some of his songs. The only critique I have with the halftime show is the fact that it was in SoFi Bank Stadium, because the reason why here is because it was so bright. It was so light. I enjoy halftime shows that are more in the dark, that are darker, and still in LA at the time that it was happening. It's still bright. It's still bright in LA, and obviously with the roof being all glass, it was still bright in the stadium, and I just didn't really like that. I kind of would have enjoyed it a lot more, and I believe most people can agree with me here. I'd enjoy it a lot more if it was in a closed stadium where they had all the lights off. That would be sick. That would be a much better halftime show. Not the best halftime show of all time. I just want to make that very clear. The best halftime show of all time goes to Prince. And it's what was it, Super Bowl 41 or something like that? That goes to Prince. Gonna give that to the Minnesota guy. I see a lot of people on Twitter claiming that it was the best halftime show of all time, and they were saying that halfway through the halftime show. People were tweeting that out. I'm like, okay, it was great. It was an amazing halftime show, but come on here, come on. I understand rap music is not for everybody. But it was still enjoyable. I feel like it was enjoyable for most people, and just an outstanding halftime show. When you look at commercials, though, I really don't care. Like, people always talk about, oh, this commercials this year weren't great. I don't care. I'm not watching the commercials. People are always like, oh, during the Super Bowl, this is when you're supposed to watch the commercials. This is when you're supposed to look at No, I'm on my phone trying to read updates on Odell Beckham Jr.'s injury, trying to read updates on Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford's leg right now. That's what I'm looking at during the commercials. One thing I will say, though, during the commercials, I'm just happy that you don't hear the same commercials going on, that it's not the same like Hy-Vee commercials happening. Now this is in the Minnesota area that we see a lot. So the same like Hy-Vee commercials or the same AT&T commercials or T-Mobile where it's the candy commercials. I don't care. That's not fair or whatever. And it's nice to know that there's some different commercials if you are going to watch it. That's what I care about the most. I don't care if the commercials are bad or if they're good at the end of the day. I don't even know what other people think because I really don't care. I'm there for the Super Bowl game and I'm there for the halftime show and I'm there for the ceremony afterward. It is going to be a party in LA for the next week and beyond because they might not be big football fans in California or Southern California. They might not be big football fans, but what they are is big partiers, and that's going to be a party city as it always is for the next week, and it's going to be super interesting to see watch unfold. I just want to say I was cheering for the Bengals. Yes, I wanted the Bengals to win. I will always go underdog unless if I hate who the underdog is. I'll always go underdog. But what I will say is it feels really good to see Cooper Kupp finish off his season with Super Bowl MVP because he should have got league MVP this year. And him being snubbed from league MVP, it's good to know that he finished it off with Super Bowl MVP. On top of that, it's great to see Andrew Whitworth win a Super Bowl. I mean, it just feels so good. Andrew Whitworth, oldest player now in the NFL after Tom Brady's retirement. Andrew Whitworth is the oldest player in the NFL. Starting left tackle for the Rams has just been outstanding his entire career. He's been a top 10 tackle throughout his entire career, been extremely healthy, played 16 seasons with the Bengals, who he was playing in this matchup, got Walter Payton Man of the Year this year, and it's good to know that he got a Super Bowl. On top of that, it's great to see Matthew Stafford obviously get a Super Bowl. I believe a majority of people were cheering for the Bengals, but wanted to see Matthew Stafford win a Super Bowl because that man was locked in Detroit for a long time now, and it's good to see him win a Super Bowl. And outside of that, same goes for Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, Von Miller, obviously, he has already won a Super Bowl, but still, it feels good for him. Aaron Donald, obviously, he's been the best defensive lineman of our generation. Of this 2010 generation, Aaron Donald is the best defensive lineman, and it feels so good for him to win a Super Bowl while he was still in his prime. Because Donald might be 30 years old, but he's still technically in his prime right now. And it's good to see a lot of these players. Eric Weddle on top of that. I mean, the list goes on of players. It feels good to see win a Super Bowl. And at the end of the day, as long as it's not the Packers, as long as it's not Tom Brady winning another Super Bowl, I'm totally fine with that. And the Rams, I'm happy that they won the Super Bowl, and it feels good. And LA is definitely going to be happy for the next until maybe they're going to be celebrating this for the next 5 years because they're not in a very good position to rebuild. And I'm going to say something that a lot of people might disagree with me here. Matthew Stafford is only a Super Bowl winning quarterback when he's with a very good head coach and playing for a very good offense. So the moment that they start losing a lot of these pieces due to not having enough draft picks in the future, it's going to be interesting to watch unfold. Eric Weddle is not going to return with the team. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with a lot of their defensive players. It's going to be interesting to watch unfold. But again, Rams and Lions completely won this trade. Rams and Lions completely won this trade. Good morning, you guys. Good morning. Happy Monday. Kevin O'Connell week is right. Kevin O'Connell week is right. We get a Super Bowl winning head coach coming in. Feels so good. I hope he's not. Okay, here's the thing, though. I hope he's not a head coach who comes into our team and is still like high on winning the Super Bowl pretty much. What I mean by that is still doesn't come in as like jittery, like, oh, won the Super Bowl, like super happy, because you see this happen with a lot of teams where they win the Super Bowl and are like super happy throughout the season and not really focusing on the next season, and then the next season is a disaster and they end up missing the playoffs. This is what we saw with the Eagles 2 years ago, where they were on a Super Bowl hangover is what they call it, where they win the Super Bowl and then they go into the next season and completely fall apart because they're not as ready and they're still off of the Super Bowl. I honestly thought that was going to happen with the Buccaneers, but they got their stuff together and eventually didn't go too well with them. Julian Marker says Lions fans are acting like they won the Super Bowl because of Stafford. Exactly. I saw a picture on Twitter. It was the Lions, how teams like hang their Super Bowl victories or something like that. Lions hung a flag saying their Super Bowl victory. Their quarterback won a Super Bowl in LA or something like that. But yeah, definitely feels like they won a Super Bowl. They also felt like they won a Super Bowl when they beat our Vikings this year, which is terrible, not good. They felt like they won a Super Bowl on that game as well. Still, I'm still, even though I wanted the Bengals to win, I'm still happy with the Rams winning the Super Bowl. I mean, I love the outcome of this game. I love the halftime show, just an outstanding game. And it did come down to the final play. Now, I hated the play calling, or not. Yeah, I didn't like the play calling as well. I thought the Rams play calling was terrible, continuing to run the ball into brick walls against that Bengals defense. When the Bengals defense, you know what is wrong with them. And it's been what's wrong with them the entire season. The Bengals secondary is terrible. Now, Von Bell and Jesse Bates, I understand they're a great safety duo, but their corners are god awful. I mean, Chidobe Owezi might have had a solid season, but they, at the end of the day, they signed him off the streets for a reason. Eli Apple doesn't. It's obviously Eli Apple. He's been a meme his entire career, and they continued to run the ball against the Bengals defensive front, who was doing a very solid job against a Bengals defensive front who have one of the best defensive end duos in all of football. By the way, I just want to mention here how the defensive end that they signed from the Saints, I mean, one of the best free agent signings of last year. I'd give it actually third best free agent signing of last year, after obviously I would have to go Matt Judon number 1 and then Devondre Campbell number 2, and then I'll give him number 3. But looking at that, I mean, the Bengals, I mean, the Rams' offensive play calling was terrible. The refs did an awful job, and we can't just dismiss the fact that the refs were trying to make the Bengals go, cut the game close and have the Bengals go into overtime. Good to know that the right results did happen, and that was the Rams winning, even though the refs were completely on the Bengals side for just about the entire game. I mean, the play calling was terrible, and it's going to rise a lot of that. The NFL is rigged, and people saying that. People have been saying that for years and years and years. And I understand there's been a lot of cases where people have been paid to purposely lose games, and refs have impacted the outcome of games. And you see this happen a lot in the playoffs. And I understand where people are coming from, but just stop trying to ruin sports for me. Please stop trying to ruin sports for me. I mean, the NFL has to fix the ref situation. And I'm going to talk about, now that the NFL season is done, the 2022 NFL season, or 2021 NFL season, was by far one of the best in history. And I just want to say this season was outstanding. Not only and the postseason was great too. Now, it might be a little biased here, but seeing the Cowboys and Packers lose in the postseason on their very first game this postseason, it felt so good for this team. It felt so good. It felt like a win for the Vikings pretty much to watch these teams lose. Felt like a win for the Saints to miss the playoffs as well. And now Sean Payton's retiring for them, and they're in a terrible situation. Saints are going to finish 4th in their division next year. I'm going to be completely honest. That NFC South is terrible. That NFC South is so bad right now. I think the Falcons are going to be a above 10 win team next year. From the way it's looking at right now, I believe the Falcons are going to be above 10 win team next year. They really have to put their team into defense. If they can be a defense heavy team, because they're in a good position right now. If they can load up on defense, Falcons can easily own their NFC South. And not only next year, for the next 3 years, after Tom Brady and Sean Payton are both retiring. I mean, they're in a good position to control that division. Matt Ryan might be washed. Yeah, I'll agree. He might be washed. However, at the end of the day, they extend him one more year, put him on a better contract. They can completely go all in next year. Now, we've been saying this for the Falcons for about a long time now. We've been saying this for the Falcons a long time, and I believe they're also on this list. Yes, they are. They're right here. These are all the teams that have not won a Super Bowl. They're in the exclamation mark right here. You can see the Bengals right there. Bengals, you got one more year with the mug. You got one more year in the mug. We'll see how you guys look next year. But Bengals, I'll say it again, and I've said it already. I will cut off an arm and a leg to be in the situation that the Bengals are in right now. Like, you guys might have just lost the Super Bowl. Yes, it sucks. It must be terrible. I mean, as Vikings, we barely ever get to the Super Bowl, so I don't know how that feels. But I know how it feels to lose in the NFC Championship game and either lose to a field goal or get humiliated. However, with that being said, you guys are in such a good position to rebuild. I mean to go back next year. I mean, your division is not looking very tough right now. It's not going into the season. We thought the AFC North was going to be a very tough division. However, what's happening with the Steelers? We know the Browns are the Browns, and the Ravens. Who knows what's going to happen with the Ravens? We know that that their season was bad due to injuries. However, we don't know how their team's going to look completely healthy at the end of the day. So who knows what's going to happen with the AFC North? But that Bengals team is amazing, and they're going to be good for the next decade. They will, because of how great their offense is looking right now, and they're all young guys, and they really just have to beef up that inside of the offensive line, and Joe Burrow's just going to make plays with the time that he'll have under center inside the pocket, because that pocket was closing in quick. Now, we knew this going into the game. We knew the pocket was going to close in fast, but the fact that Burrow was sacked 7 times in this game. I just want to clarify how incredible of a quarterback Joe Burrow is. He was sacked 9 times and beat the Titans, sacked 7 times, and nearly beat the Rams in this game. Like, Joe Burrow is an excellent, outstanding quarterback. People talk about him being like the next, like he's obviously going to be their franchise quarterback. They got their guy, obviously. But you look at them for the next decade, and that Bengals team, you build your offense around them, you beef up that inside of the offensive line. Like, that's really all you need. To be completely honest. Defense is important. I'll say it again. Defense is very important in football, especially getting a lockdown corner. That impacts a game tremendously. However, if you can make your offense just how they were playing this year, just keep all of your playmakers, your young offensive playmakers. Zach Taylor still your head coach. You just beef up that offensive line, like you're going to at least the divisional round of the playoffs next year. At the bare minimum. Fire Knee says, if they didn't win, I think some of the older players would have thought about retirement for the Rams. Yes, we know Eric Weddle's going to retire. Weddle came out of retirement to win a Super Bowl. We know that's what happened with him. Obviously, Aaron Donald. People talk about Aaron Donald retiring. I don't know why people even mention Aaron Donald retiring. He is still in his prime. That man is 30 years old and still the best defensive lineman in all of football. Now, I mean, TJ Watt's not a defensive lineman. Let's remember, TJ Watt is a linebacker, so we're not talking about him. Aaron Donald's the best defensive lineman in all of football right now. Might not be the best pass rusher anymore, to be completely honest. TJ Watt is a monster, but Donald is still, he's been the best throughout this entire 2010s and is going to continue to be a great defensive lineman even into his 30s. So he's not going to retire. Von Miller, who knows? Von Miller's a free agent. He might leave the team. He might come back with the team. No one really knows what's going to happen with Von Miller, but still a great signing for them to bring Von Miller back on their defense. It's an interesting team because the Rams right now, obviously the Rams are a tough team. They're a very tough team. They might in 2 years be the worst team in the NFC West. You look at that NFC West, they might be the worst team in 2 years because right now with obviously Kyler Murray being Kyler Murray. Now, who knows what's going to happen with him? I mean, there's trade rumors surfacing around Kyler Murray right now, which is very odd to see. This situation with Kyler Murray is super interesting, and I'm going to talk about this real quick because with the Kyler Murray situation, he's this is from what I've understand right now. With Kyler Murray, he is not happy with being with the organization, with being with the Cardinals right now, and rightfully so. I mean, the Cardinals did not finish the season how they wanted to finish, losing to the Rams, getting blown out to the Rams in the playoffs. On top of that, the Rams don't seem happy with Kyler Murray. They say he doesn't seem like much of a leader and something like that. So it's super interesting. And Vikings, we could definitely make a move for Kyler Murray. However, I don't think they're going to trade within their conference. I just don't think it's going to happen with how many teams need a quarterback in the AFC. Just don't think the Vikings are going to be able to get him. However, Vikings can still make a move for Kyler Murray and try to take him. And then looking at the NFC West outside of Kyler Murray, you obviously have Russell Wilson, who will likely stay with that team. And then you have back in San Francisco in the Bay, you got the dude from Minnesota, Trey. Yeah, whatever his name is. People always slip my name. But yeah, that guy as well. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with them? 3rd overall draft pick. Didn't have the tremendous rookie season, but just about every quarterback has a bad rookie season. Just about every quarterback, which is why Justin Herbert's season. I mean, Herbert is another outstanding quarterback, another player who I would literally kill someone to have on my team right now. Bengals, you can be mad about the loss, but you cannot be mad about your team right now. Because that team looks tough. That team, this is the best Bengals team I have seen my entire lifetime. That's not saying a whole lot because I haven't seen some great. I've only seen the few years where Andy Dalton was actually a good quarterback. People forget Andy Dalton coming out of the 2nd round, like that was a massive hit on a quarterback because Dalton might suck now. He might be a terrible quarterback now, yes. But the few years where he was the Bengals quarterback, I mean, he did a very good job. His connection between AJ Green, I mean, he was a solid quarterback, and especially coming out of the 2nd round was a big hit on quarterback. And another thing with the going back to the quarterback situation with the Vikings, I mean, obviously they can make a move to try to trade for Kyler Murray with what's happening with that situation. Now, I mentioned that the Vikings aren't going to get Kyler Murray. Let's be honest. Like, let's cut straight to it. Kyler Murray is a young, super talented quarterback. I just don't see a case where he gets traded to a team in the NFC like the Vikings. Just don't think it's going to happen. So I don't want to completely talk a lot on the Kyler Murray situation because maybe if he was an old guy, he'd get traded to the Vikings. He's undoubtedly the best quarterback in the NFC. under the age of 25. I want to restate that I said NFC there, not AFC. NFC quarterback under the age of 25 is Kyler Murray, which is why I don't believe he's going to be traded to the Minnesota Vikings. They can make a move for him, but if you look at the Vikings quarterback situation right now, here's the thing. Let's be completely honest. I do want Kirk Cousins to be traded. It doesn't look very possible right now. It doesn't look possible. And you look at just the start where the Vikings brought in Kevin O'Connell as their head coach. I mean, Vikings brought in Kevin O'Connell, and according to Adam Schefter, one of the reasons Kevin wanted to get the job in Minnesota was because he already had an established relationship with Kirk Cousins, because he already liked Kirk Cousins as he was his quarterback's coach when he was with Washington. Now the Washington Commanders. When he was with Washington, they already had this established relationship, which is why I was mentioning how this is a very, very good head coaching hiring, because it's so important to have a good relationship between your quarterback and head coach. And you see this around the league. I mean, just look at the 2 Super Bowl teams, for example, with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow. Like, it just shows how important it is to have a good relationship with your quarterback, build around that quarterback, make him your franchise guy, and be a pass-heavy team. I mean, just look at the 2 teams in the Super Bowl, for example. That's what I want the Vikings to do. And I mentioned how this was my top pick for a Vikings head coaching candidate when it came down to the final 4 candidates for the Vikings. I mentioned many times how I was very, very fond of the Vikings bringing in Kevin O'Connell. So Kevin O'Connell does like Kirk Cousins. And from what they've mentioned so far and from what we've heard so far, the Vikings will stick with Kirk Cousins at least through the 2022 season. Now, while I absolutely hate this decision and I don't like it at all, I can see where they're coming from. Because if you look at the Vikings right now, look at even just the Rams. I mean, the Rams won a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. Like, Matthew Stafford's a good quarterback, don't get me wrong, but he's on the same level as Kirk Cousins, where he's a good quarterback who can win a Super Bowl, just needs to play under the right system. Matthew Stafford and Kirk Cousins, I believe right now, are on the exact same tier of quarterbacks. And you know what? They're both above tier than Ryan Tannehill. I mean, just look at Ryan Tannehill. They had the best record in the NFL. And again, he was just not an amazing quarterback. You can just put him in the right situation and you can be a Super Bowl contending team. So look at the Vikings right now. They've mentioned that the Vikings will likely stick with Kirk Cousins through the 2022 season. Do not play Kirk Cousins next year on his current contract. It would be so stupid to play Kirk Cousins on his current contract, where he has $45 million of guaranteed money in 2022. That's a $45 million cap hit, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. The only 2 quarterbacks to have a higher cap hit than Kirk Cousins is Aaron Rodgers and somehow Matt Ryan. Oh my gosh, the Falcons are not in a good situation right there. But Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan both have a higher cap hit than Kirk Cousins, meaning Kirk Cousins is going to be making more money than Patrick Mahomes, meaning Kirk Cousins is going to be making more money than just about every quarterback that's better than Kirk Cousins. So you look at it right now, and it's such a bad situation the Vikings are in, to where if the Vikings do play Kirk Cousins in 2022, which is most likely going to happen from the sources that we have with Tom Pelissero and what Adam Schefter has said. His name missed my mouth right there. But from what they've said, it looks like the Vikings are going to stick with Kirk Cousins at least through the 2022 season. Do not play him under his current contract and give him an extension for 1 more year. Now, here's why. Because I do want the Vikings to trade away Kirk Cousins, but if they do play him, they cannot play him under this one contract. They need to extend him for 1 more year. You extend him for 1 more year, you give him $70 million of guaranteed money through 2 years. That's a $35 million average annual salary for 2 years. Again, I don't want this to happen, but if it's happened, this is the 2nd best scenario, that the Vikings have to extend Kirk Cousins for 1 more year if they play him in 2022. So this is $35 million of guaranteed money in 2022 and 2023. We know the guy Kirk Cousins is, to where he will only sign a contract if it's fully guaranteed money, which I think is so stupid and ridiculous. It just hurts your team, because what if you get injured? I mean, what happens then? You still are making your money? I mean, I hate the guaranteed money that Kirk Cousins demands. It makes me so furious because, yes, he's a very healthy quarterback. I understand he might not get injured, but we see healthy quarterbacks get injured all the time. Look at Russell Wilson, who played, 10 seasons without getting injured and just missed a majority of this last season, and they had Geno Smith step in. Like, you have to factor in the fact that he's a quarterback. He's going to get hit in just about every game. He will likely No, he's not. He doesn't usually. He hasn't had a bad injury throughout his entire career. But you have to factor in the fact that he can get injured, and him getting this much guaranteed money makes me angry. However, at the end of the day, I would much rather have this happen than them play him under a $45 million cap hit in 2022. So it's $10 million less than what he would be making in 2022 if they do give him the 1 year extension where he's making $70 million of guaranteed money through 2 years. If this happens, the Vikings have $10 million to work with. That'll put them under the cap where they can actually bring back Tyler Conklin, where they can focus on free agency and bring in some young guys. Now, I've said how I'm not a fan of this, but I want to talk about this because this is the most likely situation with the Vikings right now, that they do extend Kirk Cousins and have him on a 2 year contract. But here's the thing. Even though the Vikings have mentioned that they're going to stick with Kirk Cousins, that doesn't mean that they're going to stick with Kirk Cousins. What I mean by this here is what the Vikings could be doing here, and we want to talk about this as a possibility, what O'Connell and Kwesi could be doing here is getting leverage in trade. Because if you go out into the very start of offseason, which now the NFL season is done, if you go into the NFL offseason and immediately say that Kirk Cousins is up for trade, you lose a lot of your trade leverage, meaning you're going to get a lot less than what you would get if you wanted to keep Kirk Cousins. See what I'm saying here? Where the Vikings are likely going to want to keep Kirk Cousins. However, if you get an offer, say let's be realistic here. Say the Denver Broncos offer you 2 first-round draft picks. How are you not going to take that? In what world do you have the Denver Broncos call you up and say, we'll give you 2 first-round draft picks for Kirk Cousins, and you somehow say no? In what world does that make sense? So let's see here. Even though the Vikings want to stick with Kirk Cousins, it doesn't mean that they're going to stick with Kirk Cousins, is what I'm saying here. Because you can get so much more from 2 first-round draft picks from the Broncos than you can from just having Kirk Cousins. And I want to make myself very clear that you can get 2 first-round draft picks for Kirk. Because if you look at even just the past trades, you'll notice a trend amongst a lot of the previous quarterbacks that were traded, and you'll notice a trend and say, oh, they were over traded on. I mean, even just look at Matthew Stafford. I believe they gave up 3 first-round draft picks or something like that for Stafford. Kirk Cousins and Stafford are on an even tier level, and the Rams gave up a lot. Why? Because they're a boom or bust team. Why? Because they were a Super Bowl winning now team, which is when they just won a Super Bowl. So that's it worked in the Rams' favor, and it also worked in the Lions' favor. Even just look at Carson Wentz. Kirk is much better than Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was worth a 1st and a 3rd round draft pick. Look at the Vikings, who traded for Sam Bradford years and years ago, when we traded for Sam Bradford and gave up a 1st round draft pick. Like, you can get 2 1st round draft picks for Kirk Cousins, and I don't see a situation where the Vikings can honestly get an offer for 2 1st round draft picks and turn it down. Because you look at a lot of the quarterbacks or a lot of the teams in the AFC who are a quarterback away from competing, they can't simply go ahead and sign someone in free agency. They can't. This is not the same free agency class that we had 2 years ago where Tom Brady and Drew Brees were entering free agency. This is a free agency class where the best quarterback entering it is Marcus Mariota. Not a Super Bowl winning quarterback right there. Transitional quarterback at best. Now, you can argue, obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick, but you can't just dismiss the fact that he gets injured every year on top of that. And then you look at the draft, and you can't just simply draft a quarterback and somehow make a Super Bowl out of it in your first season. Like, this is not going to happen in this upcoming quarterback class, which is why a lot of teams could be looking to trade. One of the teams is obviously the Denver Broncos. You have the Cleveland Browns. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers. These are just 3 teams in the AFC that could look to trading for a quarterback. Look at the ones in the NFC. I mean, the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, if they get a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, they'll win their division with how easy that division is. Sean Payton and Tom Brady are both leaving the NFC South. I mean, Carolina Panthers can take control of that division with Kirk Cousins. And you look at a lot of teams around the league who can trade for Kirk Cousins, and I don't see how you can get an offer for 2 first-round draft picks and say no. And that is what I say. Even though the Vikings say that they're going to stick with Kirk Cousins, I don't believe that means that they're going to stick with Kirk Cousins, because I can't see why turning down a trade like that would make any sense. Would make any sense at all. And then Jimmy says, I think they don't have a choice, man. Best thing is to trade him. Don't extend. Yes. Okay, so I agree. I agree the best thing is to trade Kirk Cousins. And I've said this many times over and over again. It saves us $35 million of cap space in 2022, and we can get some good draft picks for it. So it's a win-win-win for the Vikings to trade away Kirk Cousins. However, with that being said, it doesn't look promising. With what we've heard from Kevin O'Connell so far and what Adam Schefter and Tom Pelissero have said, they've pointed at the Vikings wanting to keep Kirk Cousins. As let's not forget, one of the big reasons why Kevin O'Connell came into this organization was because he liked Kirk Cousins, was because he had an already established relationship with Kirk Cousins. And that's why he's coming into this organization, not just because it's a head coaching gig, but because it's a head coaching gig with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback. So this is why I'm talking about extending as the next best thing pretty much for the Vikings, because you don't want to have Kirk Cousins play under his current contract where he has a $45 million cap hit, and after the season, let him walk in free agency. You want to get the most out of Kirk that you can get out of it. You want to squeeze what you can out of it. And if you put him on a 1-year extension, it'll save you $10 million in this next upcoming season. And after the season, you can still trade away Kirk Cousins. You're not just going to let him walk in free agency. You can trade him away. You don't want it to be a tag and trade where you franchise tag him and then trade him away. That situation is a little too risky, and you don't want that to happen. Now, with that being said, the thing is, I do want the Vikings to trade away Kirk Cousins. I've said this many times. However, right now, the most possible situation that happens with the Vikings is that they do extend Kirk Cousins and play him under this next year and maybe one more year. That right now is looking like the most possible situation that the Vikings are in. Not only that, but if we do have Kirk Cousins on our under contract with us in 2022, we're winning our division. With Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Devondre Campbell likely out of Green Bay, outside of that, I mean, look at the Bears and Lions. I mean, they're the Bears and the Lions. Like, we're winning our division next year if Rodgers is out of Green Bay. Even if just Devontae Adams and Devondre Campbell are out of Green Bay, we are winning our division, which is why I understand why you would want Kirk to play with contract next year. However, what I don't understand is if the Vikings get an offer for 2 first-round draft picks for Kirk Cousins, I don't understand how they wouldn't take that. And that's what I say many times on. Yes, the Vikings want to keep Kirk Cousins, but that doesn't mean that they're going to keep Kirk Cousins. And that's what I'm saying here is where they get more leverage by saying that they want to keep Kirk Cousins than if they were just trying to sell him off, if that makes any sense. LGK DOC says difference between the two. Kirk wouldn't have made the throw to Kupp and would have likely thrown it away. You're right. But here's the thing. We haven't seen Kirk play with a good offensive-minded head coach yet. We just haven't seen it happen. We haven't seen him play with the offensive head coach like Kevin O'Connell, who's going to come in and can likely completely change how Kirk Cousins plays football. Because if there's one thing Mike Zimmer had Kirk Cousins do was run a very conservative and passive offense. And that's one thing about Mike Zimmer that held Kirk Cousins and the Vikings back was that. I'm happy the Vikings are sticking with their wide receiver coach, by the way, because Justin Jefferson next year could be Cooper Kupp. With how the offense was this season, where Cooper Kupp had, average 10 targets a game, we can see the same happen to Jefferson next year, where Jefferson should get at least 10 targets every single game, and the Vikings can make a Super Bowl run out of it. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, that's a little bit of an overstatement right there. I mean, let's not forget, this is the Vikings. However, it can happen if Kevin O'Connell, we haven't seen how he can run an offense yet, but if he runs an offense anything like Sean McVay, the Vikings are going to be set in 2022. Let's just hope he learns from McVay. Let's just hope it happens. Jimmy says, take the hit next year, move on afterwards. They can't trap themselves, bro. See, I disagree. Because here's the thing. You say take the hit next year, it's $45 million. Like, that is ridiculous money. Not only are you going to pay him $45 million of guaranteed money in 2022, but you're just going to let him walk after the season? You're not going to get anything out of Kirk Cousins? Not even try to squeeze something out of him? Let's not forget, Kirk Cousins is a, let's say, top 15 quarterback in the NFL. Now, his contract states that he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I understand that. He is a very overpaid contract. However, you put him on a 1-year extension, you play him this next year, you save yourself some money, you can use that money on young players. Maybe you can draft a quarterback and give him some more weapons. You can use that money on some young players. And then after the season, depending on how your next quarterback looked, depending on what rookie quarterback you bring in and how they look, you can trade away Kirk Cousins and still get a lot of value for him. I'm not saying that extending Kirk Cousins, the Vikings will play him for 2 years. What I'm saying is that the Vikings extending Kirk Cousins will give them more options, meaning they can trade Kirk Cousins after the season and still get first-round draft picks for him. I mean, he is worth 2 first-round draft picks. For what teams have traded for quarterbacks in the past, you look at that and you look at the current quarterback market, I mean, Kirk is at least worth 2 first-round draft picks. You can get 2 first-round draft picks for Kirk right now. And I don't see why why Kwesi would get a call up from the Broncos and somehow turn down a trade, a blockbuster trade where he can get 2 first-round draft picks. Like, that's incredible, especially from the Broncos, who didn't even make the playoffs. You can get a higher draft pick this year, and next year, depending on how the Broncos look, you can get another good draft pick. And Kirk is a very healthy quarterback. You've seen teams give up multi first round draft picks for a quarterback that is injury prone, like Matthew Stafford, for example. And the Rams, obviously, it worked in the Rams' favor, and it's going to work in the Lions' favor as well. So on top of that, still, good to see. I would love to see the Vikings trade away Kirk Cousins, except right now it's looking like a less likely situation than if the Vikings extend him. And that's why extending him for 1 year is the second best, in my opinion, is the second best situation for the Vikings to be in. Because you want to get what you can out of Kirk Cousins right now. Because if I'm going to be honest, Kirk Cousins has done nothing for our team. He hasn't. Now, I'm not saying it's Kirk Cousins' fault. I'm not saying he's the problem. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is the 4 years that he's been our head coach, or has been our quarterback, what has he done for our team? I mean, we haven't won the division. We got one playoff appearance, one playoff win where we won in overtime. I mean, it hasn't been a very good 4 year stretch for the Vikings. And I understand Mike Zimmer was holding him back. I get that. I understand the coaching staff was terrible. Him playing under this new regime might be a completely different story. We're going to have to wait and see. But as of right now, the best situation, I believe, for the Vikings is trading away Kirk Cousins to a team in the AFC where you can get 2 first-round draft picks for a win-now team who is a quarterback away from competing, like the Denver Broncos, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, like, I don't want to put Indianapolis Colts in there, but like the Cleveland Browns, maybe even Carolina Panthers. I mean, there's a lot of teams that are a quarterback away. And the Vikings right now, not only are we getting a new head coach, not only are we likely going to get a new quarterbacks coach and beyond, we just got an entire new defensive coaching staff. I mean, yeah, we brought in our defensive coordinator, and then outside of that, he's brought in his guys. I mean, Ed Donatel will be the Vikings' next defensive coordinator. Ed Donatel's 65 years old. He's been coaching for some time now. But we got Chris Rump, who's going to be the next defensive line coach for the Vikings. He was a defensive line coach in Florida before, and has coached a lot of NFL talent. He's was also the defensive coordinator, defensive line coach, and assistant co-defensive coordinator with them as well. So has been very good in college, and now is going to move into the NFL under a Ed Donatel-led defense, and will be our defensive line coach, replacing Andre Patterson. I hate to see Andre Patterson go. However, I like to see the Vikings taking a new approach on the defensive front. And then we have Deshia Townsend, who was going to be our new secondary coach for the Vikings, coached 8 years as a defensive back coach, past 3 seasons with the Bears. He's another person who's going to be under Ed Donatel's defense. We also have Mike Pettine. Mike Pettine, the guy who was the Cleveland Browns head coach before. He was the Browns head coach for 2 back-to-back seasons. They weren't good seasons at all. Now, it wasn't Hugh Jackson bad Cleveland Browns seasons, but it was two bad Cleveland Browns teams. But he was their head coach in the past. He was also the Packers defensive coordinator for 4 years. He was previously the assistant defensive coordinator or something like that with the Chicago Bears as well. So we have a completely new defensive coaching staff. Not only do we have what's happening with head coaches, what's happening with our entire offense right now, where they're getting new coaching staff, but our entire defense is new guys. Who stayed on this Vikings defensive coaching staff? I don't believe anybody stayed with this team. I might be wrong, but because Adam Zimmer's gone. He's no longer our linebackers coach. We fired him. We obviously fired Mike Zimmer. Andre Patterson went to coach with the Giants. And then outside of that, I don't believe there's anybody else who stuck with this organization. We have a completely different roster on defense, or a completely different coaching staff on defense, to where we're likely going to see a new roster. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Michael Pierce's contract, what's going to happen with Harrison Smith's contract, what's going to happen. Vikings are going to bring back Anthony Barr, but what's going to happen with the linebackers outside of that? And then corners as well. We have no clue. We have no clue, which is why I say this offseason is going to be super interesting for the Vikings, and arguably the most interesting offseason in Vikings history, because this is a completely new team, and we have no idea what to expect, which is why going forward, we're going to cover all of this going forward with the team. A lot to go on. Oh, LGK DOC says Townsend decided to go with the Jags. Okay. I thought he was coming with our organization. Still, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm super excited about that guy from the Florida Gators, the guy from college. What's his name? Chris Rumpf, who's going to be our defensive line coach. Now, he's not going to be Andre Patterson. Obviously, Andre Patterson is one in a generation guy. But what he is going to be, he looks promising, because he was the defensive coordinator and defensive line coach with the Florida Gators before. And at Florida Gators, I mean, he coached some NFL talent. I believe he had 18 coached defensive linemen who made the NFL eventually. So tremendous. I mean, outstanding for him. But also, he's a younger guy. And right now, Ed Donatel is 65 years old. And we have this younger guy who has experience as a defensive coordinator who can maybe be our next defensive coordinator in the future. So it's going to be interesting to watch unfold. But a lot of old guys coming in. There's a lot of old guys coming in to coach our defense right now. It's good to know we got one young guy in Chris Rump coming in. But yeah, a lot of people left. A lot of people left our coaching staff. And Vikings fired Adam Zimmer finally. Why didn't they fire Adam Zimmer as soon as they fired his dad? They just waited to fire his son for a long time later. And Mike Patine, I believe he's going to be the next linebackers coach, and super fit for the position, by the way. Absolute great hiring if he is going to just be our linebackers coach. He might be linebacker coach and co-defensive coordinator. We really don't know right now, which is why we're going to talk more going forward about this Vikings defensive coaching staff. On top of that, we have obviously our offensive coaching staff, where we have a bunch of new coaches coming in to coach this team. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And it's going to be interesting. Kevin O'Connell is going to become our head coach this week. We're going to have a new head coach this week, Vikings fans. That's what? That hasn't happened in 8 years since we've hired a new head coach. Dang, this feels so good. Not only is it a new head coach, but I believe this is the first time that I can remember personally that we have an offensive-minded head coach. Because at least in my memory, we had Mike Zimmer, we had Leslie Frazier, and we had Brad Childress. Those are the 3 head coaches that I vividly remember as our head coach. All 3 of which were all defensive minds who didn't bring us to a Super Bowl. Now we have a Super Bowl winning, young offensive-minded head coach coming into our organization to completely change our team, to follow suit with what we see other teams doing, to follow suit with what we see the Bengals doing with Zach Taylor, what we see the Rams doing with Sean McVay. Young offensive minds, like, this works. And this is what I've said many times. This is what worked for our team. This is what works for our team. LGKDOC says, just added Jared Johnson as our quarterback coach. Let's see here. Yep, I see that. Ian Rappaport. Awesome. See, it's good to see. I'm surprised we already have a quarterback coach. I thought Kevin O'Connell has worked with them. Let's look at his Jared Johnson. So, according to Ian Rappaport, the Vikings are hiring Jared Johnson to serve as an assistant on offense to work with quarterbacks under new head coach Kevin O'Connell. Source said, a 2-time participant in the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship, Johnson was a quality control coach for the Colts last year, according to Ian Rappaport. The Vikings are bringing in Jared Johnson as their next quarterback coach. So, coach history. It's good. And I did actually like the Janoko guy. I did. But again, it's time to move on. Like, you can't just stick with the same guys when you're going through this complete change. What I do like is that the Vikings are sticking with what's his name? The wide receiver coach for the Vikings. I'm so happy we're sticking with him because, in all honesty, the Vikings wide receivers are like the only good thing we had last year. Let's be completely honest. Did not go too hot. Last year was terrible on both sides of the ball. Okay, so we coached at Texas A&M in the past. Oh, has a long list of coaching. Previously with who was he previously with? He was the quality control for the Colts last year. Okay. Good signing. So now what's left with our coaching staff, I believe we need offensive line coach. Do we even need that right now? I can't remember. We have a complete new coaching tree, and it's so interesting to watch. Special teams coordinator. We don't have a special teams coordinator yet either. Oh, Ryan Feiken. I wanted the Vikings to stick with Ryan Feiken. He completely turned the special teams around. Let's not forget the fact that the Vikings defense on offense might have been a disaster this last season. Our special teams was great, and the first time I saw good special teams for this Vikings since we had Cordero Patterson. I mean, just a tremendous year when it comes to special teams, and it sucks to see Ryan Feiken go somewhere. I wish him the best of luck. I believe he went to Denver, if I remember that right. He's going somewhere else and will be their special teams coordinator and is perfectly fit for the position. We need to bring in someone new to be our special teams coordinator, but still, great. Excellent. New coaching staff for the Vikings, a new coaching tree, a new era for the Vikings, not just a new coaching staff, but a complete new era for this Vikings organization. And I am so excited to see and watch this unfold going forward. Now we are wrapping up with our 1 hour mark, so we will close this show pretty soon here. Still, such a good Super Bowl, by the way. Such a good Super Bowl. I love that. I mean, yes, play calling was terrible. It wasn't great on the Rams side where they were running the ball too much. The refs were awful. The halftime show was great. The game was great. The commercials, I have no clue. I didn't even watch them. I'm not going to lie. I don't even care about the commercials. But at the end of the day, still solid Super Bowl. And I want a lot of Super Bowls to take place in LA because that is a beautiful stadium. The only critique that I had was what it was too bright during the halftime show. I would have liked the halftime show for them to kind of turn off the sun so it could be dark in there. That'd be cool if they could do that, where they would just cover the glass when it would be like black glass or something like that. I don't think that's even possible, but if it was, that'd be cool. But it was definitely too bright during the halftime show. I will say that halftime show was amazing, but it was a little too bright on there. But still, Chris Carper is our offensive line coach. Wow, we're bringing in a lot of new guys. We haven't even officially signed our head coach yet, and we're bringing in a lot of new guys. Awesome. We have a complete new coaching tree, and it's so interesting to watch this next season for the Vikings. Not only this next season, but the off season for the Vikings. Going to be super interesting to watch this all unfold. Great Super Bowl. Great job for the Rams. Happy for Matthew Stafford. Happy for Cooper Kupp. Happy for Andrew Whitworth. Happy for Odell Beckham Jr. So happy to see Von Miller and Aaron Donald and just about the entire team and Eric Weddle. I mean, just so happy for these guys. I was cheering for the Bengals, but I'm very happy to watch all these guys win their Super Bowl. And that was Eric Weddle's final game in the NFL, and now he's officially retiring. So, still great Super Bowl, great season. I love the 2022 season. Now it's time to look to the draft. Now it's time to look to free agency and all things Vikings going forward, all things football going forward. We will cover it. We will be there. And this is going to wrap up episode 158 of Morning Kickoff. I hope you all did enjoy tuning into this episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe to the podcast for more Minnesota Vikings and football related content. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Morning Kickoff. Have a great day.